Hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Today with Tally. The mission and goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Today with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. Ladies and gentlemen, your host of the evening, Mr. Brian Tally.
Welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast, where we add real life value to the lives of everyday people. Folks, it has never been easier to listen to this podcast. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Twitter, Facebook, and About Face Radio. Simply search Today with Tally. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get every episode and stay up to date with the latest and greatest our guests in this show has to offer. Folks, as you can see on the screen right there, today's show sponsor is Woodpecker Feed Store. Now, Woodpecker Feed Store is now part of the Woodpecker business family. The sister company, Woodpecker Projects, is a landscape business that has been around the area for 5 years now. Woodpecker Feed Store was previously known as Wood's Feed Store, a family-owned business in Spring, Texas for over 30 years. The new owners, Herman and Natasha, are passionate about small business and advocates for all small businesses. Woodpecker Feed Store sells high-quality cat and dog food and a large variety of agricultural feed. You can find them at 1439 Rayford Road in Spring, Texas, or give them a call today, 281-363-3590. Or again, folks, just stop in and say hello. They're great folks, 1439 Rayford Road in Spring, Texas. And again, we would like to thank the Woodpecker Feed Store and the Woodpecker brand for sponsoring today's show. Now, folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. And look, today is opening day in the MLB. It's the best day of the year. Well, next to the Marine Corps birthday and Veterans Day. But MLB opening day always holds a very special place in my heart. We're a big baseball family, and we live and we die and we breathe and we eat and we live baseball. And it is opening day. And I am joined by A-Rod, by Alex Rodriguez. Now, it might not be the A-Rod that you know, or the Alex Rodriguez that you may be thinking of, but this is another Alex Rodriguez. So let's bring him in, folks. Alex, what is up?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Brian. Love the introduction, brother. Love the introduction.
I mean, I'm talking with A-Rod. I mean, it's opening day, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Alex, you are a U.S. Marine combat veteran, and you also served some time in the Army as well, right?
Yeah, Army National Guard, North Carolina 30th Brigade, and then New York Army National Guard as well.
Nice. Now, I know we have a mutual friend in Alan Olivo. You grew up with him in Texas, correct?
Yeah, we grew up in Hampstead, Texas. So if you haven't heard of it, it's because it's one of those towns where if you drive and you blink, it might disappear. But no, that was the joke back in the day. I mean, it was a population of 3,000. I think they're at 12,000 now. So it's actually grown a little bit since my time.
What was life like growing up in Hampstead?
Oh man, football. Think Saturday Night Live, Friday Night Lights. It's a football town. It's a basketball town. I mean, the get-togethers after the games. You get a back road out in the country and hang out with your buddies and stuff. It was just a very small community. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, kind of like Varsity Blues, right? It's kind of like, you jump in the truck, hit a dirt road,
Yep.
Good old stuff after the games. I know that's what we did after we got done playing football. I graduated from the mountains of Colorado, so we'd always run up to the mountain further, and again, had your keg parties and all that other stuff that we did in the 90s. But hey, it was
exactly
what we did.
90s teenagers, just running around. Yeah.
Absolutely. So You would end up going through high school. You would do everything in Hempstead, and then you would find yourself joining the military.
Yeah. So, to be honest, I was a troubled youth. I was running the streets, getting myself into trouble, running with the wrong crowd. And then in 1997, when I graduated high school, I met my wife that summer. And that was a game changer. A lot of my friends were getting locked up, some dying. I mean, we were small town, but we lived right by Houston, and so we had a lot of big city problems. It was like a hub, the center of drug traffic and all that. And my wife had to move back to Oklahoma because tuition was too high, and so she was like, "Hey, if you don't get out of here, you're gonna end up in jail." And so I packed up a backpack. I told my parents I'm gone. And I got a Greyhound bus ticket with $50 to my name, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I ended up in Lawton, Oklahoma. Got a job, got saved. God found me in Oklahoma. I tried running from that, and next thing I know, I'm proposing, and we're married 5 months in, and I decided, I've always wanted to join the Marine Corps, and so I enlisted. And then 2 weeks later, my wife comes home and she tells me she quit school and she enlisted too. She didn't want me to go by myself. And so two 20-year-olds find ourselves in Parris Island, South Carolina, going through Marine Corps boot camp on a buddy program.
Incredible. You join the Corps and your wife says, "Hold on, I'm going to be a Marine too."
Yeah. She said she didn't want me to do this by myself.
Wow. Now that's some sacrifice right there.
Brother, if you see this picture, that's a picture of a 22-year Marine Master Sergeant. Yeah, she put in the work.
Incredible. So were you guys able to be stationed together after you got out of boot camp and your jobs and stuff, or did it separate you guys?
Yeah, well, the amazing thing, Brian, I'm a basic Marine 9900. So basically I just got to MCT and then I didn't even make it to the fleet. I got injured. I tore my whole rotator cuff and ligaments. I had major damage in my arm. And so I had to get medically discharged. And it's ironic because my wife had no military bone in her body. I knew what I was coming into. I have a line of cousins that were Marines. And so God took us through different routes. I got out. I had to do several years of rehab. That's how bad it was. And she ended up staying in. And then I went into law enforcement. And then there was a gap before I joined the Army National Guard.
Mm-hmm. Where would you begin your law enforcement career?
It actually started in TDCJ. At the Texas Department of Criminal Justice here in Texas, in San Antonio. My wife got orders. It was 2003, and we got stationed in San Antonio. So our first duty station, or hers, was in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. So would you end up following her to Jacksonville, or did you stay back here in Texas?
So I waited for her to get situated and get orders. And so her first duty station was actually New River Air Station. And so I moved up there. And while I was there, I worked for MCCS, Marine Corps Community Services, working with the Single Marine Program. I was like, hey, I'm still a Marine by title. I did earn it. And I wanted to do something around the Marine Corps. And then when she got orders in 2003 to San Antonio, moved down there, and I joined the Texas Department of Criminal Justice as a correctional officer.
Mm-hmm. And how long would you be a correctional officer?
Correctional officer from 2003 to 2010.
And what was that like working? I mean, you worked in the prisons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke with folks and tell them, yeah, I did 6 years, 7 years in the penitentiary. And they're like, no, correctional officer. Let me rephrase that. But Yeah, it was very interesting. I got to work with security threat groups, identifying, gangs, especially in the Texas system. There's a lot of bad dudes there. And so fast forward while I'm working there, some of those childhood friends and even some cousins I ended up running into in prison. So it was like looking in the mirror if I wouldn't have taken that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I could have likely been. And it was just an eye opener, but very humbling and sombering, how quickly your life can change just by one decision.
Yeah. Yeah. You went full circle. You're like, well, I'm a product of who I roll with. I am who I roll with,
Yeah.
and so, that $50 bus ride to Lawton, Oklahoma, or yeah, I think you said Lawton,
Yeah.
literally saved your life. If you think about it,
Yes.
you got saved there, and then you would go on to live a productive life and then find yourself on the opposite end, on the good end of these criminals,
Yeah.
and these prisoners that you could have very well ended up being and walking in their same shoes. So, it was good. What did they think of you when they saw you in there? Did they respect you? Was that friendship still there, or was there a pretty great deal of respect between you and your old friends?
You know what? One of my friends, that we were out in the rec yard. They were playing basketball, and I remember our first encounter. And I heard his name, and I'm like, I know that name. And then I really knew who he was when I heard his voice. He has a deep voice. This young man, he could have went to play anywhere. He was 6'8". He was a tight end. I mean, talented. And I come around the corner, I'm only 5'6", and I go, and I'll just name him by John. I look at him, I go, John, and he's like, Alex, and I'm like, you're locked up, and he's like, you're a correctional officer. And I don't know, it was like a sense of relief for him to see me. And then he pulls me to the side and he says, I'm proud of you. He was like, I've been keeping up with what you've been doing, and I'm glad that you got out. I'm glad that you're doing something good in this world. And to this day, Brian, we keep in touch. He finally got out, and I've gotten to mentor my own friend and been able to help him advance and get his life back on track.
Good. Yeah, that's, it's always good to hear. And I know, that right there, probably means the world, to your buddy, being that he can look to you, for that source of inspiration and encouragement, and you can be honest with him, and let him know what he needs to do to get back on track. Now, you would end up joining the National Guard, right? And it would essentially lead you overseas and fighting in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So working at TDCJ, my wife then got orders. It was like every 2-3 years, right? With the Marine Corps, they're handing out orders and a new assignment. And so we got stationed back in Jacksonville, and I transferred to North Carolina Department of Corrections as a training officer for new correctional officers there. And so I still wanted to serve. But I had tried to get back into the service, but I have pins and screws in my left shoulder. And so they sent my waiver all the way to headquarters for the Marine Corps. I was trying to come back in. I did a video. I was like, man, I'm in perfect shape, 20 pull-ups, like no problem. And they tell me that they don't think I could cut it for a deployment. That it was pretty hard to get back in to any branch at that time. It was 2006. And so they shot my waiver down. So I waited another year. 2007 is when an Army National Guard recruiter I ran into out in town, and he was like, hey, you want to join the National Guard? And, I was like, man, what do you have available? It was like, this. And I always wanted to be a military police officer. He was like, well, get you in, and, I could get you that waiver. I'm like, man, if you can make that happen, do it. And so honestly, some of that, I had career ambitions. And so he told me, yeah, you won't deploy. He was like, it's stateside, you'll do disaster relief, hurricane efforts, all that, you'll never see overseas. And so I went through the warrior transition to get cultured into how the Army is. And even that was a funny story behind that. Running into a colonel and PTs and not knowing that I was supposed to salute him. But yeah, and so that was my pathway to the Army National Guard. Once I came home from warrior transition, they call it. I think a month later, I got a package in the mail saying, "By the way, you've been activated to get deployed." And so, yeah, my first year and a half a year of training, and then a whole year in Iraq.
Explain when you hit the ground running in Iraq. What was that like?
Oh man, very chaotic. You're supposed to do a right seat, left seat with the outgoing, battalion, and I think that battalion was burned out. We were in FOB St. Michael. It was actually a FOB that was held by the Marines when at the beginning of the war, but then the Army took over it, and it was called FOB Mahmadiyah. And so we were south of Baghdad, 20, 30 miles, very remote area. We were right by Mahmadiyah, is the village that was next to us. And so it was pretty much on the job training. But I think that working in a prison and just being around law enforcement and other agencies, working alongside them, I think gave me a heads up as far as to be better prepared. I was in part of the team that was in charge of the security-based defenses and security checkpoints.
So what was your day-to-day mission like when you were working those security checkpoints?
Yeah, so day-to-day mission was we had checkpoints before coming up to the base, and then also at the entry points, making sure that the cars were swept, nothing was coming in. We had local civilians that were contracted on base, and so we had to make sure that we had to escort them on base, make sure there's nothing in their bags, then go around and all the towers, make sure everybody had ammo. Half of my time was spent in the base defense operations center, monitoring the big eye in the sky, we called it. I mean, that technology, you could see about 2 miles out, and you could actually read people's name tags on their uniforms. And so that was pretty much the daily, and also escorting convoys that were traveling to Baghdad and back.
How many soldiers were you guarding a base that had joint operations, or was it just an Army post?
So we actually had some Air Force, some Navy. We were a combined arms battalion. It was an infantry regiment, 30th Brigade out of North Carolina. So we got to work with some Air Force EOD guys. I didn't even know that the Air Force had EOD at the time. They were the main ones going out in front, sweeping for IEDs and stuff like that. So pretty interesting.
What was that deployment like for you? Did you ever come across any real issues over there that may have changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, I think we talked earlier in the before we got on the show, right? That deployment, I left with a lot of guilt, survivor's guilt, because I think that first summer we were there, we were the highest casualties rate as far as losing U.S. soldiers. I think from June to July, probably lost 7 or 8 brothers in arms from our battalion from different companies to IEDs. And so constantly mortared. So, mortaring was happening, taking shelter. It was a funny story. Well, funny, not funny, but we had a brand new staff sergeant, and so we're having incoming rockets, right? I was just the E4 specialist, and he's panicking. He's like, Rodriguez, and you go to the rooftop and check it out. And I'm like, oh, and so in that moment, right, I don't want to question his authority, but so, we got our M4s and we're running to the rooftop. It's pitch black and mortars are coming over. And I'm like, everybody's taking cover. And it was a young guy. I think he was probably 18, 19, scared. And I said, man, I don't care what that staff sergeant says. We're gonna go take shelter. I was like, we're sitting ducks here. And so I grabbed him, and man, I was so hot. I actually tore into that staff sergeant, and I was like, staff sergeant, don't ever do that again. I'm like, we need to take shelter. I should have already taken the guy and said, no, we're not going. So it's things like that, that make you realize that at any moment, that it could have been you. I remember we were about to go out on a convoy, and I was the lead truck with the lieutenant, and they messed up on the trip ticket. And so we got delayed. We were the first ones going out. And so we're there waiting for over 30 minutes. And finally the lieutenant comes back down and he's like, hey, I got it fixed. And as soon as he said that, we hear an explosion right outside the gates. So there was an IED waiting where our route was supposed to go. And so we would have been the first truck to hit it, but a stray dog set it off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so mission was canceled that day, needless to say. And you go back to, your tent and you have time to reflect and go, wow, that could have been me. But then, you have where some of your fellow friends, you had coffee with them that morning, and they go out and they get hit by an IED. And so, to take that in, right, is very impactful, powerful, because and then you're left wondering, so your question, how did that change my life? Definitely dealt with a lot of survivor's guilt when I came back home.
Yeah, working as an MP, I know you already have a very heightened state of vigilance that can really increase one's anxiety, right? And and first of all, I just want to say I'm very sorry to hear about the loss of life that you and your unit had experienced, in the casualties that you guys encountered. And I know mental health has played a big part in your life on who Alex Rodriguez has become, and the man you have become today, and the mission that you are on today is because of your past experiences, whether good or bad. Now, back in the Vietnam era, people were coming home and people didn't know what post-traumatic stress was.
Right.
It's fairly a new diagnosis, been around 20 some years plus, but still fairly very, very new, cutting edge here to your type stuff.
Well, even back then, I think they called it shell shock, or it had a different name.
Yeah, it was called shell shock because they're like, why are guys coming home and they're ending up homeless and they're going directly to alcohol and illicit drugs, and their lives are being destroyed because of tremors and nightmares and flashbacks. And a lot of that stuff was really bad because they're in a jungle fighting, so they saw nothing coming until it was right here in front of their face, so it was a different war, but it created a lot of trauma, And, with what you're going through as well, is really no different, just a different setting, if you will, geographically. But still the same end result.
The rules of engagement definitely very different. So during that time when we were there, I think it was under it was the Obama administration. We were there when we handed sovereignty back over to Iraq, and that in itself was challenging. It was frustrating because in the past, if somebody took a pot shot at you, and or a sniper, or we were allowed to go and engage or pursue our target per se, right? And when that happened, our hands were tied. They were talking about, hey, we got to ask permission from the Iraqi police or get a warrant. And I'm like, it changed the game on us where, our hands were literally, they could shoot at us and everything. And we would have to retreat back. And so, it was just chaotic.
It's disturbing the amount of lives that we have lost because so many hands have been tied. And that goes from the streets of, being a police officer all the way up to the highest levels of being, an infantryman, in battle, in war. It's like, you can't shoot because the naval JAG hasn't issued that order yet, or your commander says to hold off, or the guy, the general in the rear says no. And it's like, hey, it's either kill or be killed. And really at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. And I know that there has been so much loss of life because of the rules of engagement. And that's really very disheartening when it all gets boiled down to the great men and women that have sacrificed everything because an order wasn't sent down range soon enough. And we can't be having that either. And I know that's something that I do hear a lot about, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you would end up getting home. You would serve your time in combat. You would come home with a very heightened state of vigilance. What happened after that?
So when I came home, my wife, currently was a Marine. And so even before I came home, I remember calling, getting ready to come back. And she goes, by the way, we'll be living in New York. And I was like, excuse me. And so, she got orders to transfer to New York. She got a special duty assignment, I&I, working at a reserve command. And I was like, don't they realize I'm deployed? And again, mission first with the military a lot of times, unfortunately. And so I don't even get to come back home and with my own battalion and demobilize. So I'm demobilizing with a completely different battalion of guys up in New York and Albany. And so even that was a challenge because, you build relationships and even though we're wearing the same uniform, I had been with these guys for over a year and a half. And so to come back home and not be able to decompress and demobilize and go through the process with those guys was definitely very challenging. And so I find myself in New York, immediately was able to get reassigned to MP Company out of Jamaica, Queens, the 442nd MP Company. And but real quickly, those guys embraced me. There's a lot of NYPD guys, firefighters. And so, a lot of commonalities we had. And so it was an easy transition there to have that support system. And
So I remember when I was a kid, they had a commercial, right? It was a salsa commercial. I think it was called Old El Paso. And it was New York City, grab the rope, right? It's freaking Texas. And whoa, man, what was that like? I mean, being born and raised in Texas, and then you're going overseas, you're fighting in a war, you come back and you find yourself in Queens. Was that?
Brother, talk about one culture shock after another, right? Yeah, it was definitely very different. The way I talk, I have like a southern twang sometimes, and I use y'all, and of course they don't recognize it as a word, which I feel strongly on that it is a word. But for the most part, we were blessed. We ended up in a good area with some great neighbors and found a church right away. I think that's what helped a lot, was being able to find community in church. Because prior to me deploying, we were big in our community, serving, doing community outreaches and, leading groups. And so definitely needed that for that time of change. So, but yeah, not all New Yorkers are have bad attitudes. There's some friendly ones.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of good New Yorkers too, so yeah, it's just, funny with that whole commercial. It just brought me back. I'm like, man, this guy from Texas going to Queens and all that. That was the best commercial back
Hey,
then.
if you want to,
or something.
if you want to define a concrete jungle, that definitely Jamaica Queens is that. It's a different monster out there. Yeah. And then you ever seen the movie The Last Castle?
No.
It's with Robert Redford. He was a general that got incarcerated, and so The Last Castle is a penitentiary for military soldiers and stuff. And so just imagine a castle and the big gate that draws down, the metal gate that comes down. That's what my unit looked like. It was very fortified. Imagine you have all kinds of weapons and ammunitions in the middle of Jamaica Queens.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now you can probably, really use that place. I know crime there is kind of through the roof, so that's probably a really good place to be right now out there on an island.
Yep.
If you will, out there on an island, like, you're a cornerback, you're out there all by yourself. You got that little moat around you. You got the,
Yeah.
So you would end up, I'm going to fast forward here because I want to be able to tell your story in the way it deserves to be told. I know we have a lot to talk about here. You would end up earning a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Psychology and a Master of Arts in Human Service Counseling from Liberty University. What was the motivation behind going to school after everything that you have done? Was there something in your mind that said, you know what, I got to go to school because I want to become this?
Yeah. So in 2012, I got out of the military. I had a lot of health issues, injuries. So when I was with the New York Guard, we were getting ready to deploy to Guantanamo Bay and do a year there at the prison. And so in one of the training exercises, I messed up my right foot. I tore my plantar plate. They had to break the second digit and ultimately reduce it to size. And so my gait is off. And then I had some injuries when I was in Iraq as well. And so those combined, they were like, hey, your contract's about to end. You can re-up, but you're looking at reclassifying to an administrative position. And I didn't want to sit behind a desk at the time. And I was like, well, I guess it's time for me to get out. And so I got out, got a case manager with the VA through Voc Rehab, and asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, well, why not go back to school? And I'm like, man, I graduated high school back in 1997. This was 2012, 2013. I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. Convinced me to. I felt led that maybe I would want to still do something in law enforcement in some kind of capacity. So that was the motivator for the criminal psychology. I love studying people, behavior, what goes through their minds. And I was also interested in what was going on with mine at the time. And I also have a daughter that has autism. And so I was always fascinated by the brain. And so psychology, I love psychology. I wanted to learn more about that. And so that was the why behind the criminal psychology.
When you got home from combat and you found yourself in Queens in support of your wife who had orders to I&I duty, you start to educate yourself. Did you ever have any bouts with anxiety or depression from the deployment that you were on?
Absolutely. I could tell you the first 6 months, I could not sleep. Pacing back and forth at every noise, going to the window, all the classic signs, right, of PTSD. But even at that moment, I didn't know I had PTSD. I had what they call Superman syndrome. I would refuse to go and get seen and get help because there's nothing wrong with me. And so I suffered in silence a lot for many years. And so and so even after completing my bachelor's in criminal psychology in 2017, I tried to take my life. And so it just, my wife didn't understand it. She had been deployed, but her deployments were different. You know, she did a MU. She was on ship for 9 months, and then she went to Djibouti, Africa, in support of joint operations over in Afghanistan. But all of her deployments she didn't see combat. Mm-hmm. She just didn't get it. And that's what led me into the mental health field and pursuing my master's in human services counseling.
I want to go back to that 2017 suicide attempt. Is there anything that you can share about that moment that you were feeling when you made an informed decision to move forward with this? Because I think perhaps your words, what you may say now, if you're comfortable with it, if you're not, that's fine.
No, absolutely.
Move on to the next thing. But I want to know how we could save the next person out there that may be thinking about doing something like this. And if we can even reach the heart and mind of one person today because of what you were about to say and what you experienced and what ultimately made you make that decision, I want to share that with our folks out there. Is there anything that you can share with us about that moment in time where everything's just seemed to stop? And again, you made an informed decision to end it all.
Yeah. You know, I don't think you could pinpoint it to one thing. But if anything, the one thing that went in full circle was I wasn't the same person that everybody used to know. Mm-hmm. I kept hearing that you're not the same. Something's different. And you know, mind you, a lot of it is probably truth. You know, I was very happy-go-lucky and just laughing all the time, and then it was like walls just came up. There was a coldness about me. I didn't want to show emotion. I didn't want to engage. I isolated a lot.
Yeah,
and for a lot of it was because people just I couldn't get my story out with people that could relate. And the thing about that is there was probably a lot of other veterans that probably felt the same way. If only we could come together in community and be able to support one another. But at the time, I didn't know anything about support groups or any of that. It's like Alex is going through all this by himself. He's going to deal with it, and I'm going to handle it. But what ultimately made me want to take my life was I felt the sadness. I saw the sadness in my wife's eyes, in my kids, and that daddy wasn't the same. And so I felt like, well, I got life insurance. I had done a will before I even tried, before I even attempted suicide. So I think those were some signs, and I think people probably missed them because I was getting my things in order. And for at that time, I mean, I'm 44, so 7 years ago, probably 37. Now, well, 6 years ago. Yeah, so I was about 37. I mean, to start getting things in order, right? Like, and asking questions like, who would want to, it was classic signs, and I think a lot of people missed that. And I was like, hey, I think they'll be better off without me.
There's a lot of us out there that have had those same feelings, different circumstances, different stories, but definitely relatable, to a lot of folks that listen to this show and really, a lot of America, life is hard and everybody has trauma and everybody has their way of dealing with it. And sometimes it gets so bad to where you say, I have really nothing left to offer. I have nothing left to give. Yeah. And of course, when people are going through that type of situation, you're not thinking clearly. You're probably taking a lot of pills, or you're abusing alcohol or drugs, and it puts your mind in an altered state to where you cannot make a good decision. It completely impairs your decision making. Now you look back at it right now and you probably say, oh my God, it even hurts me to even speak about this, because I love my family so much, and my children and my wife, and the life that I am living now in this productivity by helping other people because of your own life experiences and through the struggles, you have turned a negative into a positive.
Yeah. So that actually led me into the mental health field. This story, I've gotten comfortable sharing it. There's no shame in it. There's no guilt, because I really believe that, what God says, right, that he'll turn everything for your good for all those who love him, right? And so I woke up a couple of days later in the hospital. They pumped my stomach out. I tried to overdose, and my wife was making calls. She was trying to get me in with Wounded Warriors program, try to get some counseling services and stuff. And there was a representative from Camp Lejeune. They were about to get me in. They had a space, and the doctor comes in and he's like, oh no, we already made that decision for him. And so they involuntarily committed me to a county mental health facility. And so I spent a month in a mental health facility, and I tell you, that was rough, brother. I think I almost got into a fight the first night I was there. Some guys tried to take my shoes, and so I ended up 10 days isolated in a padded room, and I find myself rock bottom going, what just happened? Mm-hmm. And it was there where God just began to pour into me, because I hated the world. I hated everybody for putting me in here. Like, hey, even my ride to the mental health facility was very embarrassing. It was a friend of mine in the sheriff's department. It was a procedure for them to take you in the back of a patrol car in handcuffs. And so here I am walking out in handcuffs in the back of the patrol car, and he's saying, I'm sorry. And so I remember leaving after a month, fast forward, and I told God, I said, I'll never step foot back in a place like this ever in my life. And
hitting rock bottom, for a lot of us that have been there, it is, the best and worst day of your life, because at that point, and I even say it in my book, that when I hit rock bottom is when everything started to get better, because that's when I started to put it all into God's hands and I made an informed decision to get 1% better each and every day, that I have continued to do since, about 2019, 2020. And I haven't looked back, and I'm afraid to look back. I just look forward.
Absolutely.
But again, you've come full circle again. You grew up again near Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. You hung out with the wrong crowd. A lot of your friends end up dead or in prison. You become a correctional officer working a prison. You see your friends coming to you now as a mentor. You go overseas as a military police officer, or working, some very strict, combat related work, when you're bringing in vehicles and sweeping vehicles, a heightened state of alert and vigilance. You come back and your mental health gets the best of you, and now you find yourself in the back of a police car. You're like, man, how did this happen, right? So again, it's all these circles of life, and that just goes to show that life is a journey, right? You never know what life is going to throw your way. So that's very intriguing on how all that stuff happened. But you haven't stopped educating yourself. I think since that moment, that was that shining moment, if you will. Again, the worst, best day of your life, because from there, everything just started to get better, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I got enrolled back in Liberty and pursued my master's in human services counseling. I graduated, and by that time, my wife got orders to Camp Pendleton, California. And so we were there from 2018 to 2021. And even that was a blessing in disguise. As I was finishing up my school, graduating, an opportunity came open, and of all the places, I couldn't find an employment, for one, because I refused to work anywhere near mental health. I knew I wanted to do something nonprofit or serving the community with my master's. Mm-hmm. And there was a job on the site hiring event with they were called Crestwood Behavioral Health, and they had a position called recovery coach. And I was like, really grinding my teeth, because I told God I would never step back in a place like that, right? And I felt a calling, and that really just catapulted me in this direction, where I went ahead and went. And I was like, well, I'm going to share my story of why I'm here. And if they say no, then I know it's not for me, because again, I was trying to reaffirm that I was broken, because I still hadn't come over that hump yet. And so the program director interviewed me, and I shared my lived experience in a mental health facility. And she just sat there and goes, so when can you start? And so I started off as a recovery coach. Within a month, I was promoted to a case manager, writing treatment plans for patients that were coming into the facility. And then I met a friend of mine in church that connected me to Mighty Oaks Warriors program with Chad Robinaugh. And I went through his week-long intensive up in Rose Hill, California. And it was a life changer. Man, what happened on that mountain that day, that week, I left it all there. And from there, it just, I wanted to help other veterans. I wanted to help other people, that there is hope. There is truly a change that is waiting for everyone that wants to receive it. And so I've been blessed by Chad's organization. Still have my mentor. We still can keep in touch. He has a couple of locations. I mean, his organization is growing. And it was just amazing to meet him in person and just be able to, he could understand and relate. And and so now here I am with Balanced Living Coaching Center, LLC, co-founded with my wife. We had a dream and a vision, and we decided that one day we were gonna set up something that was affordable, eventually nonprofit, where all services are free for our community and to other veterans as well. And it's just been what a roller coaster ride it has been.
Yeah, the Mighty Oaks program is a great program. I too went through that program in 2019.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was and I know what you mean. Yeah, a very intensive, 1 week of, just finding yourself and recreating and reinventing and really just recapturing, your loss.
Yeah.
And then trying again to reinvent and to recreate that next version of yourself on who you will become. And ultimately, that's what you found on that mountain.
Yeah.
With Balanced Living Coaching Center, LLC.com. I've got that website up right now for you. Now, what does that do? Well, I'll tell you what it does. Alex is striving and connecting his clients with the resources, training, teaching, life coaching, and helping others feel empowered so they can succeed in life. Now, Alex also believes that having an excellent support system and access to services is key for his clients to be able to reach their full potential and purpose in life that God has for them. Now, with this new business that you have, who is the preferred client? Who is the preferred customer for your business? And now this is a nonprofit, right?
So right now it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's so the for-profit, the services that we do charge for feed our costs
Okay.
to be able to exist. Right now, we're in the works with another nonprofit where we're going to go under them so we can make it a nonprofit. That is our ultimate goal. We're just a baby. We just started in existence in this January.
Mm-hmm.
And so even this has been quite an interesting chapter in our lives to navigate and the ins and outs of how to create this and what regulations we need to have. And so, well, initially the easiest way to start was being an LLC, but our goal is by the end of the year to be a full nonprofit.
Where are you located?
So everything's online. All our services are online. If you are local and live in the Hockley, Cypress, Waller County, Harris County area, I don't have an actual standalone office. So I meet a lot of my clients at a coffee shop where they feel comfortable. I meet them halfway and do one-on-ones. But I have clients in New Jersey, California, so they could be anywhere. I have clients out of Mexico and Canada as well.
Folks, if you're going through some hard times in your life and you need some resources, you need some training, some teaching tools, some life coaching, and really sit down with a husband and wife couple who have some very, very tremendous real life experience, from raising a family all the way up to combat to mental health and really persevering and showing these great signs of resilience and having a great marriage and everything that you're doing in today's world can really be very beneficial to people out there that may be struggling and going through some hard times, that may be looking to spend some money in an area to improve their own quality of life and their own mental well-being. And so, folks, if you're interested in doing something like that, I highly encourage you to reach out to Alex. He has a lot to offer. His company has a lot of value. There's a lot of value that could be added to your life by just going to Balanced Living Coaching Center LLC.com. That's Balanced Living Coaching Center LLC.com. Now, what inspired you and your wife to begin this next chapter?
We always wanted to serve our community, wherever that may be. That has always been our nature, is that no matter where we ended up, next duty station after next duty station, we wanted to leave a fingerprint or a footprint, and just give back. I mean, we've been blessed so much. Brian, me and my wife are going on 24 years married, 26 years together. I mean, we've grown from teenagers to adults. And so out of that, we just wanted the same love God gave us is the same love that we're trying to give back to our community. And just to go back on the cost, we started a scholarship. It's called Agape Scholarship Award, where it awards 6 sessions for free. And so we work with all economic backgrounds. And so we do a lot of charity work. I have several clients that I see at no cost as well. So our main mission is to really help the community. And like I said, that's our why. That's our why, is to leave a legacy where even our children could be proud of that we're making a difference in this world.
And you're a very educated man, again, with all that real life experience. You have a master's degree from Liberty University. I mean, that's a prestigious university there in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I even happen to know the dean there now.
I love Liberty. That's my alma mater right there. I love Liberty.
Yeah. And you have a lot to offer. And again, these valuable resources. And you had mentioned, look, I've been married 24 years. I've been with my wife for 26. And another thing about that is we have a lot of folks in this country that are going through divorces. Well, how can we save a divorce? Well,
absolutely.
Contact Alex. He does premarital counseling. He does, he's a facilitator, and he's also certified by Prepare Enrich. And, this guy and, his wife can help so many people out there that are going through so many life struggles. It's like, folks, if you need help, reach out. There's resources everywhere. All you got to do is just open your eyes, do a little bit of research,
Absolutely.
plug in a website, and there you are. You are on the road to recovery. You are on the road to creating your own blueprint to live the life that you were intended to live. And Alex can start with that.
Absolutely. Brian, I tell you what, it has not been easy. Marriage takes work, and it takes both of us to do it, right? And I could tell you, there were times when my wife and probably didn't care too much for me. I mean, she even said, and she's okay with me sharing this because it's part of our testimony, right? She fell out of love with me. But she cared so much about my health and my mental health, right? She said, I'm willing to stay with you to see hopefully one day the man that I fell in love with. And so that took a year. And then a year later, I hear her say, I'm in love with you. And so even hopefully that somebody's hearing this that's going through marital troubles, there's still hope. If you're still together, by all means, I know that there's a case-by-case situation and safety first, but if you're willing to fight for your marriage, there is hope.
Yeah, I love that. She fell in love with Alex Rodriguez, and Alex Rodriguez lost himself, and you became somebody that you weren't, as a result of post-traumatic stress and mental health and going and fighting your own demons. But you got the help that you needed, and you have completely turned around your life and now are on a mission to help others do the same. And the cool thing about it is you found Alex Rodriguez again, and so did your wife. And with that, I'm very honored to have you on the show today to share some of your testimony with myself and our listeners out there. And I know you added a lot of real life value today that can be really valuable to so many people out there. I mean, let's face it, again, there are so many people out there that are struggling, and with veteran suicide and civilian suicide and childhood suicide. It's all on the rise. And folks, it doesn't need to be this way. There's so many valuable resources out there, and smart and educated people that actually care, that want to help pick you up, dust you off, and put you back in the fight, get you off the sidelines and back in the game, where you can be a productive member of not only your community, but to society in general. So, Alex, again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. We sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do in the military and veteran community. Your service, sacrifice, and dedication to our great nation is truly admirable.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you again for the invite. Definitely, I'm going to be supporting you, putting you out there, because I know that you're doing a great thing too, and God's using you mightily as well, brother.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. And I will nurture this relationship, and perhaps one day me, you, and Alan, my good buddy, can go to lunch, and man, we can even go to Honor Cafe, go there all the time.
Hey, you're right down the road. You're right down the road from me. So look forward to it. Yeah.
Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time, for Today with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.